Hey. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Raising the New Earth. Hi, Noah.
Hey
How
Brooke,
are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Um, so today's episode, we thought that we would take it a little bit back to the journey of intrinsic health in a sense. So we've kind of been interweaving the pillars that we learned in Journey of Intrinsic Health into our podcasts rather or as either specific episodes or just kind of mentioning them a lot, things like breath and nourishment, hydration, movement. But one of the pillars that we haven't really spoken much about is play, which is one of the 8 pillars that Dr. Zach Bush spoke about as an important thing to keep us healthy and really more so within our own health of what that is. Um, so I feel like for this discussion, we, can certainly talk about the importance of play in our own life, but as mothers, we have the privilege of witnessing and being inspired in the act of play every day through the eyes of our children. And so to that end, I think that this can really be a beautiful discussion in looking a little bit at reframing the parent-child relationship in a sense. So looking at it as a relationship, not just as we as the adults, what we can teach our children, but really looking to at what they actually can teach us. And maybe that's not even so much about teaching, but rather the remembrance of who we are. Because I feel like as children, they're much closer to the essence of how they came into this world without all of the programming and without, others' expectations coming in, that they are who they are kind of in their pure wholeness. So I think that looking through that lens, there's a lot that we can learn about ourselves and look at how we can reframe our parenting to keep kind of that wonder and that curiosity and that sense of play. So we thought we'd kind of break it down into like 8 things that we can do to really enhance that wonder of life, and not really getting stuck in the parent-child labeling. And then with that and with those 8 things, also turning it back on to us and how that can, in a sense, enhance our wonder and curiosity as well.
Yeah, and I think this is a great episode to follow up on the episode we had with Rafaela Dobles last week, our postpartum doula expert, as we touched on regulating the nervous system of children, and she gave really beautiful practical ways of helping children with any tantrums and tips to regulate us parents before we can expect a child to behave a certain way, quote unquote, in public. And just in general, I think parenting, as we know as parents, is one of the most important and rewarding responsibilities we have in life. It's stressful, it's beautiful, it's magical, it's challenging, it's everything together. However, I feel as a mom that all too often we feel that this is the area that we are least successful because we don't really have a manual. There's a lot of books out there. And I remember as a new mother, getting sleep books for babies, or I even purchased a book called Permission to Parent. And I had a friend who was a therapist. She said, I'm just drowning in all this advice and all these theses about how I'm supposed to raise my child. I have no idea which one is the right route to choose. So I think that the parent-child relationship brings up a lot of our own insecurities, our own fears, our own stress, our past traumas. And often I hear fellow moms talk about feelings like guilt or shame, frustration, and a lot of them feel hopelessness in becoming something that they weren't quite equipped in knowing which way is the best way for them and their child. But it doesn't have to be this way. So hopefully with this episode, we can encourage you to take those 8 tips, try it on your own for your own family, and allow yourselves to just broaden out the spectrum of how it is that you can navigate parenthood and motherhood in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you brought up a good point too, that it's like where we often feel the most insecure. And I think that with like bringing up these 8 points, you know, just as we were doing an episode on nervous system reset and like hope that it doesn't feel like a to-do list, but I think such as this as well, it's like, where can you hear these and kind of understand them within your own intuition and within your own like frame of reference. So it doesn't become just another, how to or another parenting like episode or book, or these are the
Right.
things you need to be. It's really tapping more into like that intuitive side. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, so with that, the first thing, and I just mentioned this a few moments ago, but the idea of allowing our children to teach us, or what, even from a moment to moment basis, when we're feeling frustrated or we're feeling worn down, really looking at that particular situation and saying, what can I learn from this? What is my child trying to teach me about myself? And how can I respond in a way that maybe makes them learn it on a deeper level of what I want them to see in this moment as well. And I always go back with this, like I said, that our children are closer to their intuition. They just came from the non-physical world, and don't have that programming and don't have these expectations. So oftentimes when we're coming into a situation and bringing kind of our adult priorities onto it, it can not always turn out the way that we want. But when we can reframe that, and I think that can be a big shift.
Yeah, 100%. In spirituality, we believe that they choose us as parents. So Souls, if you've ever watched, the movie Souls, it's kind of like that. And they choose us as parents, and they choose their family in general. So the kids choose their siblings, the souls of the kids choose the parents before coming to this world. And when we make the choice of being part of a family, this is actually a system that is comprised of the perfect souls to teach us what we need to learn so that we can become the person we are meant to be. So when you talked about, being a parent, so we are the co-pilot, we are the guides, we are the teachers, but we're also the students. So whoever you feel that this is the child that pushes your buttons, this is that child showing you what you still haven't worked on. So if there are certain areas that are on repeat and you feel like, oh my gosh, how does my child know which buttons to push? So take a look at these buttons and try to dive deep into your soul and see what you can work on. So this is for you. These lessons are for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the things that are often triggering us in a really deep way that are coming in as part of our shadow. And so I do feel like children are such a beautiful opportunity to be witness to that. And I see that in my own parenting, where something will trigger me, and when I look deeper, it's perhaps something that as a child I was more it was kind of not encouraged in me, and it's maybe something that I had wished was, or I feel like there can be so many different roots to that. And another thing I want to say with the spirituality thing, because I think it's such a beautiful way to look at it, is like we choose our parents. And that being said, though, I will say, and I'm thinking specifically of my mom, because she's mentioned this before. She is a social worker and she's a forensic interviewer for children who, out of their mouths, she has to hear horrific things that are happening to them, physical, sexual abuse. And so I will say that if that is triggering to you, just hold lightly those ideas. And I also just think that, well, I'll say a couple of things here. I think that oftentimes our mind can't really comprehend the greater picture of what's happening on a deep universal level. And that's okay that our mind can't really fully understand those. And I will say that I know many circumstances of people who have come from very traumatic places as children, things that they had to witness, horrible things, and were able to take that pain and transmute it to something beautiful. So, I just think that yes, it can be hard to understand when you're looking at like some of the atrocities of the world, but I think that when you can kind of hold it a little bit more lightly and just look and apply that to you and how that's representing yourself in this situation, rather than look at it too deeply from the mind's perspective, because the mind is never going to really be able to fully understand or rationalize things like that. So
Yeah, that's a super important comment. And for those that need to go back and listen to our Kabbalah episode with David Dua, I think he touched a lot on that about the children and how we choose the parents. And also, I think Miriam Ashkenazi also touched on that from the aspect of how we choose our parents.
yeah, I think it's something that I think a lot of like spiritualities or religions don't really emphasize or touch on, but I love how it seems like somewhat apparent in Kabbalah that that's like a very big piece of it. And I think it's just a beautiful way to just be able to look deeper at your relationships. And to me, that's what that means in like just to always think of people, whether they're your children, your spouses, people that you meet with every day, that they are there to help your soul evolve, essentially. So yeah. As another point, as I was kind of doing a little bit of research for this episode, one thing that I came across was a study that was done that talks about that kids who feel the most secure are the ones that feel the most free to play. And I thought that was really interesting. And it really does make so much sense that, and especially when you look at what play means for adults, like we have such a difficulty playing because I think for us, like the world has taught us to be insecure. The world has taught us that like other people are going to be judging us. And if we're just playing and spurting out ideas or doing, silly things, or however you like, want to think of like what play is, and I think even from like a work perspective, that's just like playing with different ideas, brainstorming, that we hold ourselves back because of our insecurities. So when I came across that idea that like the kids that are secure are the ones that will just play and pretend and are like fully engrossed in what they're doing, it makes a lot of sense because they're fully okay with who they are. Nobody's told them that they need to be judged or like, oh, that might not be a good idea. So I love to look at that and knowing that like there's no such thing as giving your child too much love or too much, like the more they feel securely complete within who they are just as they are, then they're going to engage in that sense of like curiosity and play and wonder. So I just really that just resonates with me a lot.
Yeah, and play is something that we completely forget as adults. And Brooke and I both spoke about how as we get older and we have more chores and responsibilities, we forget to play. And as adults, I feel in general, play is often forgotten. And in today's world, most of our play orients towards competition, wins or loses. This is, as Zach Bush calls it, this is a human design, not a nature's design. In nature, there's no competition. We're all achieving what we're meant to achieve. And if we focus on play to open up ourselves to life, to the imagination, to the extension and the fullness of ourselves, then we need to understand that this is essential for us to recenter this activity because it'll help with our longevity. It'll help with our spirituality. It's a full extension of who we are. And as adults, we also talked about it before the show. As adults, we turn to drinking or substances to numb and remove a sense of ourselves and judgment in order to play. So how can we become that playful selves, that beautiful extension of who we are without substances. For me, I know that when I tap into dancing and singing, anything that has to do with the performing arts or writing a song, I feel my playful self without any self-destruction or substance or having a hangover the day after. So it's an important distinction to know that to find out if we can play without numbing our self-judgment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting, especially bringing up the alcohol, because that really is what seems to bring out adult sense of play from just, fun play. And so, that's a wonderful time to turn it back on us and say, how can I find that joy and laughter and just letting go of my ego and myself and what others are thinking without any sort of external substance to do so. So, and
Exactly.
it's something that I struggle with play, and that is the most unnatural out of all of the 8 points. And yeah, I love how you have dance and I mean, you're like, I've thought of like yoga classes that I take that have completely gotten me out of my comfort zone in some sense, and not just like the yoga classes like that you just go and stay on your mat, but more the ones where you are like sharing like trainings that I've done. And what I have found is the more comfortable that I get with everyone and that I'm feeling that everyone is accepting me for who I am or like know me, then I do feel more comfortable with that. But where I need to kind of bring that onto myself is how can I feel that without feeling like I need to get to know someone first, or if they are going to judge me, or like, because really who cares? So I feel like that's one that I just for myself, I feel like I struggle with. And when it comes to raising my child, like bringing it back to that, I want to do everything I can to encourage her to be whoever she is, to be crazy and fun. And even so, like, and just kind of, I'm a bit rambling, but it is important. I think like there are times when she's being a little silly at like a restaurant or something, and I want to like tell her to stop. And it's not that I want to interrupt all of the other diners, of course, but I don't know. It always makes me think like, how can I approach this situation to where she doesn't feel like I shouldn't be doing this? I should. So it's just something to be mindful of, I think.
And that leads us to the next point of fostering an environment where they don't seek the approval of others. So if we take it first on ourselves, how about we foster an environment when we don't seek approval of others? How freeing is that experience can be? It's amazing because we said children are free of judgment, and they learn through us, and I think through teachers and other modeling systems around them, the approval of others. There is a book written by a mother and daughter called The Gift of Being Different by Abigail and Monica Berg that I really like the story about, and in general, just Monica fosters a family of different is good. Different means leaders. Different means you can be whoever you want to be because we all have our own light that we're meant to share with the world. And I think like if you get across this book, it's a book that you should pick up. It's quite unique.
Nice. And the point of that your child is picking up on who you are more than what you're telling them. Yeah. So I think that's huge for me because I do think that there's still so many places within myself that feel a little unfree. And yeah, it's like rather than, and even with what I said, like, how can I tell her? What can I tell her so she feels free? It's more like, how can I flip the script and say, how can I show her through who I am and that I'm fully okay with being, embracing every single piece of me. And then that is much more powerful than anything that I can try to tell her or say.
Yes. Yeah. And her making you feel uncomfortable is really her holding the lens in front of you saying, Mommy, here's the permission to go do that. Here's what I'm showing you. That's why you're like, oh my God, how is she behaving? No.
Yeah.
It's showing me how I need to be.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a good example of what we were talking about, the triggers, like the things that are triggering us. Oh no, you can't act like that. You need to like where
Let her,
yeah,
and
yeah.
let us. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I actually, and that, I mean, this is a little off topic, but I think it's important to say that I came across that in the United States, actually, people are much more like what like in other countries when people, I don't, it was an Instagram I post I came across, so I don't even know how much truth, but I
How
can kind of
accurate.
see it from everything that I
Yeah.
have traveled, like that the kids are just more free to kind of be who they are. And like in Europe, they just learn to, like, nothing's really catered to children as much as it is here. It's not like this is the children, these are children places and these are adults places. It's all just kind of integrated. So it was
Yeah.
interesting because I think
Yeah.
that maybe there is a sense of that here more in the United States. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I see that with our kids, you know, me being
Mm-hmm.
Israeli, my husband being an American, our children were raised here. I see it because every time we come to visit our family in Israel, they all say, "Oh my God, your children are so well behaved." And I don't know what that means. I don't know what
Yeah.
that means. Maybe this is part of the American culture that kind of, you know, penetrated, and I don't know. I don't know what that is. I mean, I
Yeah.
see other children behaving differently, but I wouldn't necessarily say that they're, you know, wild
Missing.
or yeah, or misbehaving or don't have manners. It's just I see the difference. I see European kids acting completely different. I see American kids, like the culture itself within the kids, raising the kids is completely different. I see the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's not even like, because a lot of, I read Bringing Up Bebe, which is about like French way of is teaching. And one, I just feel like there's a lot more just like, I think it's almost like going back to that, like just be who you want the kid to be.
Yeah.
Like, I think
Yes.
that as Americans, maybe we're a little bit more like just step in and like tell them and do this. And in Europe, it's like they just put them in a situation, act as you would, and they will learn by example that that's how
Yeah.
they need to act, sort of thing. So,
Yeah. I
yeah,
think that's
it's
where
just an
the term
important.
helicopter moms came, or helicopter parenting. Is
Yes.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely like an American thing, but like and it's coming. I think a lot of it has to do with control too. It's like
Yeah.
always having control of a situation. And
Yeah.
I think that with children, you can't always have control of it, but yeah, it's kind of like the live and let live, but they're going to lead by, they're going to again see your behavior and
Yeah.
mirror that. Yeah. Um, yeah, and then going back, I think this next point draws to the idea of children being closer to the non-physical, but it's that they are intuitive little beings, that they have their own intuition that is actually really, really strong. So I think when you look at like if they are wanting to, if not wanting to like hug a certain person or becoming timid or something changes within that, it's respecting their intuition and how they're feeling in that situation rather than trying to force them to do something that
Yeah.
they themselves don't feel comfortable with.
Yeah. And we both admitted to saying, hey, you know, give her a hug, you know, give grandma a hug,
Mm-hmm.
or give uncle this a hug. He just gave you this and that. So you're supposed to give him a hug.
Yeah.
And I catch myself do that a lot.
Yeah.
And I need to kind of like rephrase that, you know, I don't know to what, you know, but this is what it is. This is what we are expecting the kids to do, um, in return for at least family members. But if they feel iffy about someone, stranger or a family member, I would, you know, I would suggest listening to that, tuning into that, and just let them feel what they need to feel without us needing to apologize again for their behavior, what they're not doing, what you know, what they're doing opposite is what is expected on them.
Right. Which then again comes back to how we're perceiving the situation and
Yes.
how people are perceiving us. Yeah. And that being said, though, it doesn't have to be in big issue. Like
Yeah.
but, I find myself in the same situation, but I've also found myself saying like, oh, she just doesn't feel like it right now. Like it's not, it's not
Yeah.
nothing they have to make a big issue on either side
Yeah.
about, but it is like respecting who they are as individuals. And I think that like in a deeper sense there too, it's looking at our children as their own souls. They're like, yes, they're children and they have things to quote unquote learn about the world and the environment, but like their soul and is essentially developed. They're a whole person. And so it's like looking at them through those eyes, like soul to soul rather than parent to child. And I think all of it is well meaning when we're kind of like navigating that for them different things, but it's also realizing that when we can step in a little bit too much, we're moving them further from their intuition, where at least I can say from my case as an adult, and I think many people feel like that, it's like making that journey back to your
Yeah.
intuition. And so I think it's so beautiful if, the more you can learn to foster an environment where you can help them to stay connected to that intuition. So,
Yes, exactly.
yeah. Yeah. Um, and then, yeah, and that goes to, again, us needing to defend their behavior. We've got to,
Yeah, but everywhere, like recently we had a few plane rides because it's, the summertime. And, when a kid throws a tantrum on a flight, it's hard for the parents because immediately they're like, shh, shh, shh. Immediately it's either yelling at the child or shushing the child instead of, and I know it's hard on everyone, but they're really expressing what we're feeling. And I said it to a few mothers on flights. It's hard to sit on a flight. I'm giving the flight as a car ride, the same thing. It's hard. And so them throwing a tantrum or not being happy is really expressing what it is that we feel, but we're not going to throw a tantrum at our age. So just going into what it is that I can do for you in order to make this, this plane ride or this car ride a little easier. So for me, like I have like these organic fruit lollipops in my bag. And when I see a child cries, like I had a mother sitting with her three children, and the girl was just crying, and you can tell that the mother had it. Like she has zero patience. She's like, just that's the baby cry. And so I went to her and I happened to have a whole bag of them. It's like, hey, would your children like, lollipops? Immediately the girl was looking at me almost like she was like a year and a half or something, like tears in her eyes. Like, oh. Like she needed a change of face or a change of scenario or just an act of kindness, whatever that is. So, carry
yeah.
something in your backpack. And if it's okay with the parents, I don't know, make balloons, characters, whatever you can to make the lives
Mm-hmm.
of the parents easier.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard.
It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And that being said, like when you were describing that scenario, I'm sure that baby was picking up on the stress of the mother, and then that
Yes.
makes them more upset. So it's like this, cycle of behavior. And I think an important thing there too is like, and I will say this, and knowing that I have a lot to learn here, and I try to be as conscious as I can, but it's finding ways where you can help them connect those feelings into words, and then helping them find other ways to cope with
Yes.
that feeling that they are feeling. Are they feeling scared? Are they feeling sad? Are they feeling anxious? And what is it? And then how can other things be done? Because I think that that's a super important skill that many adults don't even have. We
Yes.
start feeling anxious. And maybe we aren't throwing tantrums, even though I have seen that,
Yeah.
especially in airports and in planes, adults throwing tantrums. However, we've all had moments where it's like, oh my gosh, like, but the more that we can get into ourselves and like, okay, how am I feeling right now? What do I need to do? I need to take a deep breath. I need to go take a walk. Like if we can teach our children those skills, then imagine as adults how they are going to react differently when they're put in a situation that does tend to induce anxiety or anger
Yeah.
or frustration. So it's just remembering that that's such an important lesson that will carry on forever, is
Yeah.
really getting in touch with. Yeah.
Generationally, because I think we're still modeling our parents' behavior. So generationally, they can impact their own family differently.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Because just going back to what we've kept saying of like your child's picking up on who you are. I mean, if you're getting frustrated and wanting to snap at people at every single, like that's the behavior that they're intuiting and seeing as being the right way to handle a situation, or not even the right, wrong way, just like the way you handle it. So
Yeah. Even
yeah.
not in plain, like I can give an example from us. Like our dogs can be pretty annoying at times. We have two huge standard poodles and they follow my husband everywhere he goes. And at some point, he's like, "Okay, stop following me, guys. Just sit down. I'm good. Stop." It's like two, it's like two horses following you everywhere in the narrow hallway. He's like, and he's not even yelling at them. But our youngest daughter picks up on that, and she said to me the other day, and she said, "I don't think Daddy behaves nicely to Lulu and Chachi, to our dogs." I said, "Why do you say so?" She said, "Because I hear his tone." She didn't use the word tone. She's like, I hear him. And yet, as
Mhm.
adults, we don't hear him yell, but it's the intention behind it that she connects to the intensity of the intention. Saying,
Yeah.
"Back off from me. I can go to the bathroom by myself without two horses escorting me." So I thought it was really interesting. And like you said, she's connecting
Yeah.
to the intention behind it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's really cool too, that I feel like you've taught her well, like in being able to like pinpoint the,
Yeah.
like I hear that the intention is not good, but it's so true. Like whether or not they can express it or not, they're always, the children are picking up on the back intentions, even if the language or the, we may think that they're not
Yeah,
feeling
they
that,
are.
but they
Oh,
feel
they
the
are.
energy. They, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah.
Yep.
They'll come and give me a hug, especially her. Like she'll come and give me a hug. It's like, "Oh, I did need a hug." Like internally, I say to myself, "I did need a hug." And she
Yeah.
finds me in times of, stress or busy, or she just comes
She
in, she gives me a
knows.
hug. She knows.
Yeah.
It's really
That's
interesting.
beautiful. Yeah. 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 That says a lot for sure. And then with that too, it's also recognizing the different brain states that we all have the capacity to have. And we can get ourselves in, especially as adults in our adult mind, into these different brain wave frequencies, but that children are, um, we are in beta most of the time, which is like the awake active brain state, but that children are actually in a theta brainwave state. Um, and which explains why that they are sponges with their environment, that they are in that like meditative, and innately connected mode. So they just naturally, going back to like that intuition, like it makes so much, and the energy that they're picking up on, that they are completely in a different brainwave state than we
Yeah.
are as adults.
Yeah, and that theta is connected also to super learning. That's why they say teach your kids as much as you can. They're like sponges. This is the brain state of learning. So allow them, like we raise our kids on two languages. My husband speaks to them in English, and I communicate with them in Hebrew. And that has been the case since they were born. That was what decided. And I see that like they're ready for a third language now. So I may try to do that, and maybe they can pick up an instrument, whatever it is. I'm gonna see if they like it. I'm gonna see if they flow with it, because this is the state that they can actually handle it, as opposed to us as adults, which is a little bit harder. Not impossible, but just harder.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think it's super fascinating that now there's so much more research going into, as adults, us getting ourselves into the brainwave that children are in, and that our capacity can increase so much. Like I know Mind Valley is a
Mm-hmm.
app that they have a lot of courses, and it's really about being able to get yourself in the brainwaves that our children naturally are in right now. So
Right.
I think it's like such a reframe where if we realize that they are actually in the state um of being totally engaged and engrossed in their environment and completely taking in all of their surroundings and everything, just it just comes to them, then how can we ensure that the environment is where how we want it to be, to optimize what it is that we want them to receive. So
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And I loved your story about the chanting. um I
Yeah.
think it
So
was that.
there's an old biblical story about, in Yom Kippur and Atonement Day, we blow the shofar. So there is an old biblical story. I hope I'm remembering it right. The rabbi is blowing the shofar during Atonement Day, and he was trying to blow the shofar. No sound came up. The congregation was a bit uh, uneased because you have to blow the shofar as part of Atonement Day, and then this child just started singing, and the congregations were about to shush him, like, how dare you sing when the rabbi, the rabbi is trying to blow the shofar. But blowing the shofar, when you look at it from a spiritual lens, is about consciousness. Not everyone that will blow the shofar will open the gates of heaven, per se, or will open our opportunity to the supernatural realm. No. If your consciousness is about, let me show them how I'm going to blow the shofar, no light will be revealed that year. But that child who started singing made the rabbi pause, and he looked at the child and he said, now the gates of heaven have opened up. So he acknowledged the fact that the child's chanting and, in a sense, ego-less behavior was the one that opened the heavens.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, it's like, where can we get out of our own way and not try to think everything, but just
Just
allow it to
be, just
be.
play. Yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
creative expression of our soul, creativity, like even studying, quantum biology and integrative medicine, the emphasis is on creativity, which I loved hearing. Like I love hearing my professor talk about creativity because I come from creativity. And so when creativity and science and consciousness and parenthood all meet each other, wow, what a beautiful world we can create. Incredible.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And the and thinking of creativity is really just being connected to that source. And so
Yes,
when we are that clear and open vessel, as our children just naturally are, then that's where that natural creativity just
100%.
explodes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and then you can speak to this a lot more because you do have children, multiple children, but the idea of sibling rivalry and what they can each learn from each other, and the Kabbalistic perspective of that as well, I think is
Yeah.
interesting.
I think, if you have more than one sibling, as adult now, I remember the rivalry between us. There was a hidden rivalry between us for sure. I can remember that, and I'm seeing it with my own children. And again, looking at it through the perspective of the child's soul chose the parents, and the child's soul summoned in their siblings, then I know that there is a correction within them. What can they learn from each other? So them pushing each other's buttons, it's them teaching the sibling what it is that they still haven't learned about themselves, what they can get better at. So for example, I have, a lioness in the family and one that's more timid, but equally strong, like innately strong inside. And so our Leo pushes the water signs buttons a lot more often than that we wanted. But that teaches our middle child, like, hey, she's teaching you to be more of a lioness. She's teaching you to stand up for yourself. So instead of crying, there's something to be said about, okay, what she did to you that you didn't like, communicate with her, and what did she do to you that you did like? But for them, and that's the approach we took when they were little. Now that they're older, I let them figure it out. So I'm their guide, but I'm not their referee. I refuse to be a referee. You're not going to see me say, hey, you do this. I'm not going to do that. So every time they come to me and a sentence starts with, hey, mommy, and figure it out. You guys are going to figure it out. And they're figuring it out, even if it means yelling a little bit, they're going to figure it out. So
Yeah.
I don't want to correct them all the time. They need to be able to, facilitate group communication, and it starts at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that brings up a point too of like on the playground, as you were saying that, like sometimes I have a tendency to want to like jump in if I see like they're, a toy that isn't being shared or something, but like I catch myself. And I mean, and I think that a lot of parents do this as well, which I think is good, but like let them work it out. Like they, that's not our job to tell them, whose turn. I mean, there's obviously the times that we need to, but yeah, where can we allow them to learn those lessons themselves that they need to learn rather than stepping in and telling them. Yeah.
And to advocate for themselves, right? You want them to advocate for them. That didn't feel good to me. What you did just now made me feel sad. Can you share? So
yes. Right. Yes. So important too. Yeah. It's, if anything that we're facilitating, it would be how to communicate what what the child is feeling with the other person. Yeah. I think that's so important. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. So I think that's
just our 8 points.
Yeah, those are our 8 points. And like I was saying, like I think with all of those, it's as much about your child and or not even teaching, but modeling them, but also with you and how you can bring many of those things into your own life as well. And like I was saying, like I do think that play and wonder and curiosity doesn't always come the most natural to me. So I am working on, as I see my child and maybe wanting to go to my own programming of what I want to quote unquote teach her, I continue to take those steps back and ask what I can learn. And I'm so glad I kind of naturally brought up a big one of like my insecurities that I put on her because, oh, don't act like this. So like, how are other people going to be judging your behavior? It's a huge one for me that I still need to work on. So, yeah.
For me, just to remember to play, not just with myself, the dancing, the singing, like almost like an isolation thing. I need time to create, but also how do I play with them? How can mommy be part of them playing without pushing it aside because I have more important things to do? That's my personal battle right there.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, and I think that's important to remember too, that play isn't about importance. Like I think oftentimes even with creativity as adults, we're like, okay, I need to be creative so I can make this because that is what I'm gonna like sell, or this is my job, but like, where can you move away from that and release the expectations that anything has to come from how you're playing? And that's where the beauty comes in, when we can just be free of all of that. So,
right. And returning to that play as a spiritual and creative outlet, because creativity is part of play. So how can you incorporate everything together?
Yeah. Yeah. And I will just, as we're wrapping this episode up, I just thought of a book that I've read snippets of, but I do want to read the whole thing. And I think it probably very much relates to this episode, but it's Rick Rubin's new book. It's
yes, I'm reading it now. Yeah.
The Creative Act, I think is what it's called. But it just so much of what he has said in the snippets that I've said, it really is like the getting into that mindset of play that the beautiful things come from.
Yeah. And there's a few sources. I forgot the name. There's Well, there is an organization called Spirituality for Kids. It's a nonprofit educational organization that brings universal spiritual, social, emotional learning tools to homes and to schools. So they have games that you can purchase, or some of them are free to teach kids how to navigate through the game of life, which is super interesting. I actually purchased a few of their games, and just be focused on the idea of creativity and play, as opposed to being held back and listening to your own intuition and what does that mean, and putting words into the emotions that they're feeling. I think it's a fantastic company led by a woman by the name Michal Berg.
Yes. And speaking of children, good. Okay, yeah. So hopefully those were some good tips. And again, not as to-do lists or lists on what you should or should not do, but rather just like checking in with your own intuition and how they feel and how you can naturally integrate them.
Exactly. So we'll see you again soon.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.